Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and today's video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be about my testimony to what God did for my marriage and basically for my life, really. And I know it's been 4 months since I last put out a video, but this video will explain exactly why. So 4 months ago, July 18th to be exact, my husband and I split, physically separated, and it was because we were going to get a divorce. And I know I had put out another video before talking about how, God saved my marriage, but this time around it was legit. I mean, we were 2 steps away from getting a divorce. And so I left everything in Texas. Me and the baby came up to Pennsylvania to live with my mom, and all of my stuff was down there, and I basically just had to start over. I had to get a new job. I had to buy new clothes. I didn't even have a car, so I had to share my sister's car. I just remember, like, the first week was probably the worst and the hardest week out of the whole journey, and it was because my husband was the person that I spoke to every single day. I talked to him about everything. He was basically my best friend, and he still is, but he was my best friend. He was the only person that I was around all the time, so to not be able to talk to him and to have that same connection with him was extremely hard. And I just remember I was extremely depressed, and I decided that I wanted to try to talk to somebody about it. And so I decided to speak with a prophet. And this prophet is a friend of my husband's family. I called him and I'm crying and I'm like, we're getting a divorce. I don't want this. What do I do? So I spoke to him, and then he tells me, God's going to restore your marriage. And I said, okay. And I took that and I ran with it. And he said, every day I need you to thank God for restoring your marriage. Even if you don't see anything happening, even if some days you wake up and you don't have any hope or you don't have any faith, thank God for restoring your marriage. I said, okay. I decided that I was gonna build a relationship with God, because I had always believed in God, I'd always prayed, but my personal relationship with God, it just wasn't what it should have been. So every day I woke up, I thanked God for my marriage. I decided to read the Bible. I was praying more. I did a lot of just research about like how I deal with this situation, like standing for your marriage, and I had learned a lot. And so in my time of praying and in my time of reading the Bible, my relationship with God grew a lot closer, and I was able to hear God more clearly. And so I remember I started a journal, because I just felt like if I started a journal, I'd be able to look back on it and see how everything happened day to day. So in the journal, I would write literally about my day, no matter what. If I was crying, if I was happy, I would write about literally everything. And honestly, once I was finished writing it, I started to feel a lot better. I remember I was on Instagram, and I had watched some lady was talking about how basically when it comes to a spouse, or if it comes to a significant other, it's important that we pray and ask God to show us if that person, if that man or woman is the man that God intends for you to be with. And although, like, when my husband and I were 14 years old, I knew that he was the one. But despite feeling that, I still prayed, because the way it works is, if you can want something extremely bad, but if it's not in God's will for you to have it, it just won't work out. And that's just the way it is. So I remember one night I prayed and I said, Lord, I just need you to show me and tell me if Donnie is the man that you have intended for me to be with. But God knows that I'm the kind of person that needs some type of physical confirmation. I need to see something or hear something to know that it's from God, because if not, I'll start to feel like it's me, like it's my own wants and thoughts and stuff. So I said, Lord, if he is the one that you have intended for me to be with, show me the scripture, Mark 10:9. And so after I prayed that, of course I was looking for it, because once you pray for something and you start to pray for a confirmation like that, you start to look for exactly what you asked for, and God won't show it to you. And that's what I learned, because after I had prayed for it, a day went by, 2 days went by, I'm looking for it, I don't see it. The minute that I had forgotten that I even prayed about it was when God showed it to me. And I was laying in bed one night, and I had joined this group. It's called Rejoice Marriage Ministries, and basically it's a bunch of people going through divorce and separation, and it's where we all come together and pray for each other and uplift each other during our journey. So I opened that app like I'd always do, and the very first thing that I saw was Mark 10:9 highlighted in blue. And even though I had forgotten that I had prayed about it, I instantly remembered, like, oh my goodness, this is what I asked God to show me. And I thought I would be more excited when I saw it, but it was kind of just, I was more so filled with peace and knowing that, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm on the right path, So after that, I'm still praying. I pray every single day, all night. even I'm in my car, I'm praying, at work, I'm praying. And I just remember some days were a lot harder than others. Some days I'd wake up and I'd be so full of joy and so full of peace, and I'd be okay. But then there were some days where I'd wake up, I'd be okay, but then throughout the day I would start to get depressed again. I would start to cry, and it was in those moments that I believe my relationship with God got even stronger, because during those times all I had was God. There was nobody else who could take the pain away. There was no one else who could really understand what I was feeling but him. So I would put on worship music, and I would listen to that music until there were no more tears falling from my eyes. And that's just what I had to do. And so over time, it became easier to stand for my marriage. Over time, I wasn't crying every single day, And I can admit that there were a lot more times where I had asked God for confirmation, because it's very hard, even as a Christian, to have faith and believe, without seeing the fruits of that. And I'm not perfect. I know there are a lot of people out there who go through the same thing. And so I remember there were days where I'd be very doubtful, and I'd pray and say, Lord, I just need you to show me this, or show me that, and show me that. And God showed me every single time. Every single time he showed me. And so I remember once I was getting all those confirmations, I kind of let go even more. I was kind of like, okay, I am not in control anymore, so I'm just going to let God do his thing. And so I remember one time I was writing in my journal, and I was just praying and asking God for certain things to happen in my marriage, and to show me certain things so that I knew that he was working. And one time I had asked God, I said, Lord, I need you to open the lines of communication between my husband and I, because at the time, Donnie and I weren't even cordial. We would only literally speak just by, like, if I would pick up the phone and say hello. That was the closest we were getting to talking. It was strictly about the baby. And so I remember writing in my journal, asking God to just allow me to speak to Donnie, just to hear him and hear his smile, because when someone smiles on the phone, you can hear it. And so I would pray for that. And I remember a couple of days later, Donnie called me out of the blue, and we were just talking, just like old times. And gradually over time, we were able to talk a little bit more. I would text him. We wouldn't talk every single day. It'd be like once, maybe every 2 weeks or something like that. And it would literally be like one text. But still, it was better than not talking at all. And so I was excited about that. And so, like I said, I just kept praying and standing. And one thing that really helped me during this time was finding other people who were in similar situations, or people who had been in the same situation, and getting advice from them. One thing I also did was I spoke to my preacher a lot. Like, whenever I was dealing with something, I would talk to my preacher about it, and she would uplift me and give me, the strength to keep moving forward, because there were a lot of days where I wanted to give up. There were a lot of days where I cried and begged God to just take the feelings that I had for my husband away from me so that I wouldn't have to deal with this again. But God wouldn't allow it, because, in the Bible it says that God doesn't like divorce. He's not here for it. So I remember I was in my car one day, and I just remember, praying. I said, Lord, I understand that we're physically away from each other, but essentially I'm still his wife. And although in his mind I'm not his wife, I still am in your eyes. And so I said, Lord, what do I need to do to show him, or to just continue to be the wife that I need to be? And God told me, tell him you love him, tell him good night. And even though I was nervous, I realized that when God tells you to do something, you just do it because it's what's best. And so, not every night, but every once in a while, I would text him and say, I love you, good night, I'm praying for you. Just basically letting him know that I'm still here, and that I'm still fighting for this. And, amazingly, he would text back and say, I love you too, or good night. So I want to talk about, one other time where I had finally asked God for the last confirmation. And this was, I want to say, maybe 3 weeks before God restored my marriage. So I'm sitting at work, and I'm at my desk, and I was just looking on social media again, and I saw something that just, got me in my feelings, and it just put me in my head. And so I remember sitting at my desk with tears in my eyes, and I'm praying. I said, God, this is the final time. This is the last time I'm going to ask you to show me or tell me if Donnie is the right one. Because, I had been praying, this was like, it was almost 4 months now. It was going on the 4th month, and I still wasn't seeing anything. I mean, I was seeing subtle changes in my husband and in our connection, because like I said, we would talk more, and we would laugh more, and all, and stuff like that. And I was seeing all that stuff, but it just wasn't happening. And so I'm like, Lord, I need to know that you have been speaking to me, and that I'm not crazy, and that everything that I've been hearing is from you. I said, if Donnie is the one, if I'm not doing this for no reason, and I'm not crazy, Lord, I need you to show me, or allow me to hear the name Hudson, because Donnie's last name is Hudson. So I said, allow me to see it or hear it. It just needs to cross my path, Lord. So I sat at my desk, and a couple of minutes later, my coworker calls me into his office, and we're just talking about how, I think he was talking about how Sears went bankrupt or something like that. And so he starts talking about Macy's and JCPenney and how those stores went bankrupt as well. So then he starts to talk about how one of those stores was overtaken by another store. And he was sitting there trying to remember the name of the store, and I'm sitting there in silence because I have no idea what he's talking about. And so he finally looks at me and he says, Hudson Bay took over either Macy's or JCPenney. And immediately I was just smiling. All I could do was smile, because I was like, okay, God, like, I hear you. I'm not asking anymore. I trust you. That's my confirmation, my last and final confirmation. Right? So mind you, a couple of weeks ahead of this, I had asked God to show me rainbows, show me a rainbow when restoration was near. And, I want to say about 2 weeks before restoration, I was seeing rainbows everywhere I looked, on social media, on ads, on like the TV and stuff. I would just see rainbows. And I was like, okay, God, I hear you, but where's my man? Because I'm seeing these rainbows, but I'm not seeing my man. It was Thanksgiving, and Donnie had texted me and told me that, his friend was coming up this way towards the east, because, he was in Texas, and he was going to come by to see Josiah. And so I remember, when he told me, I just remember praying and, asking God to just allow us to talk, allow us to spend time with each other, because I knew he was coming to see Josiah. I knew he didn't want anything to do with me. So I was just praying and asking God to just allow me to be able to. In my mind, I was just saying, look, God, I don't even want to talk about it if he's not going to tell me what I want to hear. Like, I don't want to deal with this. And so I'm starting to fall asleep, and then he comes and he says to me, Zay, I want to give us another chance. Just like that. And I was so overwhelmed with joy. It was like every single emotion that you could possibly feel, I was feeling. Because it had happened, even though it took 4 months to get to this place, the way that it transpired happened so fast, and everything just happened perfectly, because I just remember like thinking, how am I going to get my stuff? Like, it's all the way in Texas. How am I going to do it? God allowed it to happen in the perfect way. God literally aligned every single thing to work out perfectly according to his plan. And I just remember hugging him and holding him and just being so thankful and so grateful, that God cared and loved us enough to, restore my marriage just like he said that he would. And so I wanted to put this video out there, one, because I genuinely want to help people and encourage you, but two, also because I remember God telling me that I would have to share my testimony. I feel like there are a lot of people out there who are in this situation right now where, their spouse wants a divorce, and there's one person fighting and standing for their marriage, and there are probably people out there who want to give up because they feel like there is no hope. They feel like nothing can be fixed, but with God, all things are possible. And as humans, we can't always figure everything out. We can't always fight battles. Some battles are for God to fight. He can do it for you. You just have to allow him to do it. You have to trust him. You have to have faith. Some days aren't going to be easy. Some days you're going to want to give up and throw the towel in and say, look. But you cannot allow the enemy to take your marriage, because that's basically what's happening. Everything that's happening in your marriage is of the enemy. And the fight is never against your spouse. It's always against the enemy, always. And so you have to pray, and you have to, ask God to help you, ask God to give you peace and to give you strength to keep going and to not give up. I mean, it's hard, when you're in it and you hear people talking about, oh, God did it for me, he restored my marriage, and I know you just want it so bad. It's like, I want my marriage to be restored right now. But you have to give God time. And one thing that I also learned during this time is that I had to work on myself. I had realized that there were a lot of things that I was doing as a person and as a wife that put a strain in my marriage. And I feel like sometimes we need to look at ourselves instead of looking at our spouse. I feel like a lot of times that's what we do. Whenever we go through things, we're always focusing on what the spouse did instead of looking and thinking, well, what did I do? How did I contribute to the rockiness of my marriage? And that's something that I had to do. So, no matter how long it takes, it'll all work out for your good. You just have to focus on the right thing. You have to have faith. You have to work on yourself and also love your spouse. Another lesson that I had learned during this time was how to love my husband unconditionally. And I had to forgive him. I had to forgive myself, most importantly, for hurting him. But I also had to love him despite what he said to me, despite how things looked. I had to make sure that no matter what was going on, he knew that I still loved him. He knew that I was fighting for our marriage and that it was important. And those are things that you have to do. The number one key to this whole journey, to standing for your marriage and, and waiting for God to restore your marriage is to let go. You cannot be in control. You can't have, one hand on the steering wheel while God is trying to take it over. You have to just completely let go and let God do what he's going to do. No matter how bad it looks, no matter how impossible it seems, with God, everything is possible. I hope that my testimony encouraged you to keep standing. I hope that, this shows you that, no matter what it looks like, your marriage can be saved. And, if you need support, find people who will support you and pray for you. And, start a journal, write everything, write down how you feel, allow God to take all of your burdens, allow him to take all of your fear. One thing that you definitely can do is trust God and know that he's going to do what he says he'll do. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.